So
News moves fast. So before I get into my breakdown of the Supreme Court's Birthright Citizenship nationwide injunction case, you should know there's been an update. So listen to Michael Popak from Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network break the news, and then I'm going to get back to my video on the other side.
Breaking news just hours after, literally hours after the United States Supreme Court ruled in earthquake-shaking manner that federal judges no longer have the ability to issue universal or global injunctions. They've got to take on the Trump administration one case at a time, one set of plaintiffs at a time, and they can't fashion relief to meet the challenge of, for instance, an order trying to rip away birthright citizenship. They can't do that by nationwide injunction. Well, Justice Kavanaugh in his concurrence said they can just use a class action vehicle. And Justice Sotomayor said, just use a class action. Okay, we're ready. A new class action motion has been filed in Maryland just hours after the Supreme Court shot it down. And at the same time, a request that Judge Boardman issue a temporary restraining order to restrain on behalf of the putative class, to restrain the executive order that tries to deny birthright citizenship to babies who are born or about to be born throughout the country. You asked for it, MAGA majority of the Supreme Court, and just hours later, because they were ready, the lawyers for public interest groups have struck again, filing their motion with Judge Boardman in Maryland. One interesting side note about Maryland, Donald Trump just 2 days ago sued all of the federal judges in Maryland, including Judge Boardman, on a matter related to immigration policy. So she is a defendant in her official capacity in a case brought by Donald Trump and his Department of Justice. Let's do justice right here on Legal AI.
The Supreme Court did not overrule birthright citizenship today. Again, I'm going to repeat. The Supreme Court did not decide that if your child is born in the United States and you're undocumented, that your child would not be able to claim his or her rightful citizenship to the United States. That is not what the court issued today. Today, tomorrow, next week, few years, that child would always be able to get birthright citizenship. The narrow Supreme Court ruling was a procedural win. It was a big one. It was horrible. And I'm not going to sugarcoat that. However, it did not say that birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment was overruled. Okay? All right. The Supreme Court has been doing these things that's not good, but I'll get into that later. So I just want to make sure that's clear to you. And I'm not the only lawyer that's going to tell you that. You're going to see a lot of other lawyers say this. And if you read the news accounts that you see being released today, they're going to say that this case had to do with nationwide injunction. What does that mean? Let me explain it to you clearly before I share with you what the implications of the decision is. And we're going to look at Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's dissent. There's a passage in her dissent that really explains why this decision is terrible. Though it does not overrule birthright citizenship, it does set up something dangerous. It set up a horrible precedent. It is a terrible decision. No sugarcoating, but it does not overrule birthright citizenship. Rest assured. And no matter what Donald Trump says about, no, I'm going to issue a nationwide injunction, if he does, it's going to be challenged. He doesn't know the law. He doesn't understand. Every single day, every single executive order he issues is against the law. And the Supreme Court acknowledges and knows very well that Donald Trump's executive order is against the law. And that's why it's shameful that they know his executive order is against the law. They know he cannot overrule birthright citizenship, but they're still doing this thing to expand executive power. And it's a hypocritical thing they're doing, because I'm going to show you receipts of these justices issuing orders just last year. That's the exact opposite. But what was different? Joe Biden was in office, and the nationwide
I view the demise of the notion that a federal judge can order the executive to adhere to the Constitution, full stop, as a sad day for America. The majority's unpersuasive effort to justify this result makes it sadder still. It is the responsibility of each and every jurist to hold the line, but the court now requires judges to look the other way after finding that the executive is violating the law, shamefully permitting unlawful conduct to continue unabated. Today's ruling thus surreptitiously stymies the judiciary's core
My
duty to
child will not
protect
be
and
able to get
defend
any
constitutional
benefits
rights.
because of that.
It does
Now,
this
that is
indirectly
my
by
child could be
preventing
sued
lower
if I have the money
courts
resources.
from telling
When
the
I sue,
executive that it
a
has
district
to
court judge is
stop
going to say, no,
engaging
you're
in
entitled to a birth
conduct
certificate.
that
And my child
violates
will be
the
able to get
Constitution.
his or her birth certificate
Instead,
after suing.
now
That's
a
what the Supreme Court
court's
said.
power
Every
to
single
prevent
child would
constitutional
have to sue if
violations
they're denied a birth
comes
certificate.
with an asterisk.
Now, the other
A
things
court
what the
can make
state
the
said, 'cause a bunch
executive
of the state's attorney
cease
generals
its
filed a
unconstitutional
brief
conduct,
in the Amicus
but
brief there in this
only
case too.
with respect
They said
to
it
the
would be
particular
burdensome. Why?
plaintiffs
Because
named
let's
in the
say
lawsuit
that I don't
before
have the money
them,
to sue, and my child does
leaving
not
the
have a Social
executive
Security card,
free
and I
to
decide to
violate the
move to New
constitutional
Jersey
rights of
or to New
anyone
York
and everyone
or
else.
to
The
California,
receipts
which
are
is a blue
damning.
state.
Each
When I
of
go to
these
the blue state, let's
conservative
say my
Supreme
child has
Court
a debilitating
justices
disease,
has
my child
very
will have a
recently
challenge getting
warned us
resources
about the
that they're afforded
dangers
to
of
in that blue
executive
state that
overreach.
does acknowledge
They
children born in the
claim
United
to
States,
care
but
deeply
my
about
child won't have a birth
separation of
certificate.
powers,
Now, how do they provide
checks and
services?
balances,
How do they
and
track all of
presidents
the various
reaching
different
beyond their
people?
constitutional
Although it's
authority.
a mess, and that's
But
what the state
that
was
was
saying.
when
That's
the
the mess
president
that
was a
they
Democrat.
created. That's what was
Now,
argued during
they
the oral
twisted
arguments
themselves
portion of
into
this
knots
case. Is
to
that it would create
justify
a
the
nightmare.
exact
And
same
Ketanji Brown
overreach
Jackson's
because it's coming from Donald
dissenting
Trump.
opinion,
Let's
this
take a
portion of
look
it really
at what they
does a
said
great job
then and
encapsulating why
compare
it's a
it
bad
to what they
holding.
just allowed now.
In her dissenting opinion,
Hence, it
Justice
reeks of
Ketanji
hypocrisy
Brown
and intellectual
Jackson writes,
despondency.
the most egregious is Samuel Alito in a dissenting opinion about an FDA drug. Justice Alito cautioned against the executive branch's potential refusal to comply with a nationwide injunction, writing that even if the Supreme Court restricted access to methamphetamine, the FDA could refuse to enforce that decision and continue allowing access while the lawsuit continued. Then you have Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote that the executive branch does not possess a general freestanding authority to issue binding legal rules and may issue rules only pursuant to and consistent with the grant of authority from Congress, which is interesting, but Congress did not grant him authority to overrule the Constitution. Now here we have Justice Clarence Thomas, who said that the Constitution gives Congress control over the public fiscal, but it specifies that its control must be exercised in a specific manner. It's reiterating the fact that Congress has power over spending.
Here we have Justice Neil Gorsuch in a dissenting opinion in United States versus Nichols in 2015. Justice Neil Gorsuch says there's ample evidence that the framers of the Constitution thought the compartmentalization of legislative power not just the tool of good government or necessary to protect the authority of Congress from encroachment by the executive, but essential to preservation of people's liberty. I mean, come on now. The hypocrisy of it all. Anyway, so I am going to, in another video, do a full rundown of the wins, which includes another surprise win that people aren't considering a win. It is what it is. We just have to work with what we have to work with. And it's a travesty, but the good news, again, like I said, it doesn't overrule birthright citizenship. It puts a lot of roadblocks in, and it also gives Donald Trump the win. It's not the win that he thinks he has because he's stupid. At the end of the day, that's great. You know, the thing about it is that gets people excited, gets people agitated, let people be aware, get on their toes. Operation 2/3. We got to get rid of the people who's emboldening this inept buffoon in office. JJ Legal. Check out this video. I'm going to put the other case summary that I'm talking about here.